100 miles an hour on this track feels like 55 down the end. I hear it. Probably a good call.
This is kind of what happens to the bricks. They're 116 years old, right? You get the sense of how flat Indiana is. As you think about our country, the world was transitioning from the horse-drawn carriage to the horseless carriage or the automobile. And he realized that once you got outside of center cities, there weren't really places to test the vehicles. This was all farmland. So he decided to build a test ground for people to come here and test their vehicles. But at the same time, he thought it would be entertaining for people to see as those young daredevils, if you will.
You come off this corner in an IndyCar at 230 miles an hour, and from this point to there, you got to get in pit lane and slow down to 60 miles an hour.
It's much like operating a city. And so we built the racetrack really to test that, showcase Indianapolis's technology. It is what makes us special, is our history and tradition.
So we're here at Indianapolis Motor Speedway with the president of the Speedway, Doug Boles. Doug, thanks for having us here. I gotta say, walking in this place, the first impression is just, wow, the sheer size of it.
That's what everybody says. You
Yeah.
know, you're around here for a long time, you get to know it. And what my favorite part is when somebody comes for the first time, you almost know 95% of the people walk in and go, oh my gosh, it's huge.
Yeah.
So when you watch it on TV, Indy cars at 230 miles an hour get around 2.5 miles or our 300 acres in about 39 seconds. So it makes it seem really small.
Yeah.
And then when you get in here, you realize 235,000 permanent seats, this place is massive.
I know, it's incredible. There's so many great vantage points to watch a race. Is there one that strikes you as the best?
What's crazy is people love their seats no matter where they are. Now, if you said to me right now, hey, what's the best seat in the house? I've never been. I'd tell you upper deck, turn one.
Yep.
Because you see everything coming right at you. You see the front stretch, all our iconic buildings, the Pagoda and the pylon. But really, it's about who you sit with and who introduced you to the Speedway.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of cool part about it. There really isn't a bad seat. And if you're used to those seats, you think you have the best seat, whether you really do or not.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we got to go out on the track a little bit earlier and see, one of the things, I'm not a big motorsports guy, not a big history of that, but I did so much research in the lead up to this trip. And one of the things I was really struck by was a photo you took about 7 or 8 years ago of they repaved the surface of the track and you pulled out this core
sample.
It's amazing. So I think, can you tell the people what that's about?
Yeah, so the track was built in 1909. It was a crushed limestone and tar, and in the fall of 1909, they paved it with 3.2 million bricks. And then over the years, we've just put asphalt on top of those bricks. So what makes us unique is the width of the track and where it's laid out is exactly how it was in 1909. We've just resurfaced over the years. So we were having some issues with the track, the way it was weeping and the water was seeping into it. So we did these core samples. And on the north end of the track, just at the exit of turn 3, we did this core sample. When it came out with the bricks and all of the different layers of asphalt on it. And it just really, we always talk about history is what makes it special. But when you see that, you're like, oh my gosh. That is our history right there in a core sample of all the different repaves, and it goes right down to those bricks that were put in the fall of 1909.
That was the coolest thing to me was I knew they called it the brickyard, right? Because of the yard of bricks. I didn't know the whole thing was all bricks over 3 million, like you said. That's such an amazing undertaking.
And most of them are still under the track today.
Right.
Which is the crazy part. They've just resurfaced over them. Now there are places where we've had to excavate them and it's just asphalt, but for the most part, I would guess we're somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million of those bricks are still under the surface, which is a management challenge for us. When you think about Indiana winter, so you got the freeze and thaw, and then the summer's the extreme heat.
Yes.
That causes the expansion and contraction of the bricks is different than the expansion and contraction of asphalt. So depending on the time of the year, especially coming out of winter, you'll see areas in the track that are raised because the bricks are still frozen, but the asphalt's more pliable, and then over time it settles back down. So those bricks sort of manifest themselves, they move. It's almost like the track's alive and you see it on the surface of the racetrack.
Yeah, and it's like, I think people who aren't familiar with auto racing, they see, all right, it's a round shape, they don't understand the intricacies of the surface and how that impacts the racing and all those things. Yeah.
It is definitely one of the things we manage the most. So the asphalt we have currently was laid in the fall of 2004.
Okay.
So we're coming up on 23 seasons of racing on that asphalt. And that's the thing we take care of the most. So in the winter, we leave it alone. We don't plow it. We don't put chemicals on it. We let Mother Nature decide when to plow and when not. And that's really what we're trying to do is take care of that surface as long as we can before we have to go through a full resurface. First of all, it's expensive.
Right.
And second of all, it adds a weirdness that the teams, they don't know the grip level and the smoothness and maybe some undulations over 2.5 miles that changes their setups completely. So we're trying to do everything we can to maintain that asphalt as long as we can.
Getting just behind us here is that famous yard of bricks. I think it's a good place to start.
For sure.
We talked about how they were covering the track, but they extend actually off the track all the way through, and I believe even into the parking lot.
They do. They go back into a fan spectator area. We really wanted, and it hasn't always been that way.
Okay.
The yard of bricks has always been exposed as our start finish line, but as we over the years, we decided to extend it across pit lane, and then we've just extended it all the way out to where the fans, sort of our fan plaza area, it gives the fans an opportunity to interact with the bricks when they can't come out on the track.
Right.
And these are bricks that at some point in time were on the racetrack. So they are 1909, they went through the kiln to be put here, and we're someplace on the racetrack, and as we've excavated, we've got a couple pallets still left, and this is how we actually put these here. So one of the traditions is to kiss the bricks when they
yes,
win.
of course.
So the number of fans that are out there doing their photo, kissing the bricks with the Pagoda behind it. It's a cool way for the fans to interact with something that the drivers get a chance to do.
And so as you're obviously, the race cars are going over these bricks and they're being worn down, so you have a stash of them to replenish those as they're worn down.
We do. We went through a pretty big replacement of the bricks out on trackside a few years ago where they just get worn down over time, and they start to break up, and the mortar starts to come apart. So we went through a full, I think there's roughly 500 of those bricks that are out there, and so we just went through a complete
What's the
renovation.
lifespan on those?
I think that the last time we did that, it was probably 7 or 8 years. So, and it just depends on what other cars we have racing on the surface. And you can start just the wear and tear of those bricks that are right there in the line of fire. These obviously, you don't have cars going across them, so they're in perfect condition. So we can always excavate those and move them if we're. And as you go closer to the racetrack, you can see more and more the rubber on up from the teams and just the cracks in them. So they get used more.
Yeah.
But it's in that 5 to 7 year range.
Right. So we're here just a few weeks before the 500. Yep. And obviously there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of people, coming together to help get the track ready. What goes into getting the track ready, both the surface and also the facility for the opening race of the season?
So we really start planning the 2025 Indianapolis 500 18 months ago. So we're planning it before the 2024 race. So like right now we're in the middle of finalizing plans for 2026, starting to think about 2027. So on race day, we have 12,000 people that work for us on race day to execute the Indy 500. So you really just start planning all of those pieces of it, and it's everything. We're basically a small city.
Yeah.
So 350,000 people here on race day. It's the second largest city in the state of Indiana inside the racetrack.
Wow.
Which is, so you have everything that a city has. We've got people having to worry about all of our plumbing, so the water, all that piece through here, all the 5,000 plus fixtures that we have to take care of. And we winterize in the winter, so we've got that challenge. You've got all the medical and public safety that you have to worry about getting all that lined up. We've got basically a level 1 trauma center here, one of the busiest emergency rooms in the country on that Memorial Day Sunday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Wow.
So you think about most cities of 350,000 have more than one hospital. We have one.
So, we talked about the history of it, right? They built in 1909. One of the things that came up in my research I found really interesting was the reason the track is here is that Indianapolis was such a big car manufacturer at that time. You don't think, obviously now, people think of Detroit, they think of other, other countries as well, but Indy was like one of the early car racing, or car manufacturing places. This was primarily a test track to begin, right?
Correct. So in 1909, as you think about our country, the world was transitioning from the horse-drawn carriage to the horseless carriage or the automobile. And there were so many manufacturers in central Indiana. The guy named Carl Fisher, who founded the Speedway, was one of those folks that had an early car dealership. And he realized that once you got outside of center cities, there weren't really places to test the vehicles.
Right.
So he decided to build a test ground for people to come here and test their vehicles. But at the same time, he thought it would be entertaining for people to see as those young daredevils, if you will, who were driving cars, figuring out how to go faster than others. And so we built the racetrack really to test that, showcase Indiana's technology opportunity, hoping to draw some interest in people locating in Indianapolis. Detroit wasn't Detroit in the automotive capital of the world yet, and there were just so many auto manufacturers here that this became a proving ground in the early days.
Makes sense. And then, the 500 comes in a few years later, and then I think maybe the most interesting thing that I read was how the track, it was during World War II, auto racing not allowed, short, the rations on rubber and on fuel. So the track was shut down, left basically to rot, and then nearly went under at that time.
It's funny, but for really Tony Holman, who bought the racetrack from then, at that point in time, it was owned by a guy named Eddie Rickenbacker. And Eddie was America's first fighter ace in World War I. He raced in the Speedway before World War I. World War I, he becomes a pilot, becomes a fighter ace. Eastern Airlines is what he's kind of famous for. But he buys the Speedway, and then right after November 1945, he sells it to a west side of Indiana, Terre Haute, Indiana businessman named Tony Holman. And I think had Tony Holman not bought the Speedway, we're probably standing in residential development or something like that. And he invested in it and really is the one that took it from an important race, but maybe making it the most important race in the world in the way that he really just invested in it. And they started racing again in May of 1946. You know, people often ask me, have you kissed the brakes? I've never kissed them. So I started.
Could be a first for Sports Illustrated.
I started on the team side.
Okay.
And so to me, it was, you got to win the Indy 500
Okay.
in order to really kiss the bricks. So
Okay.
I have, there's that team side in me. My stepson is an IndyCar driver, Connor Daly.
Oh.
And I've told my wife, if Connor wins, I'll kiss the bricks.
There you go.
And likely, you know, my last day here at the Speedway, I may kiss the bricks on my way out the door. But
Okay.
until then, I encourage everyone to do it.
Okay. See, I'm not a speed demon. You know, I top out about 80 miles an hour on 995. So I'm not winning the Indy 500. Not in my future. I might as well just do it now.
Right. There you go. Well, yeah, let's do it out on the track.
Let's do it out on the track.
Let's do it on
yeah.
We'll do it properly. So as soon as these. But this is kind of what happens to the bricks over
I
time.
see.
They start
I see.
They're 116 years old, right?
Yeah.
So they start to chip and come apart, and
Yeah.
and that on a tire, an IndyCar tire could be a challenge, right? If you catch the edge the right way.
Right.
So when they start to look like that, or we have issues like this where you have a brick that'll start to break out, and you just need to add more mortar. You can see where we've added mortar just to fill in the gaps and the holes. You're also trying to keep water out of there, right? It's the water gets in, it freezes, it creates more challenges.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think of it as like a living, breathing thing.
It is, and it's kind of that way, right? And I spend a lot of my evenings here just walking around and just think about the history and tradition. And it's sometimes I'm a student of the history.
Yeah.
So you know the people that have been here, and you start feeling spirits. It's weird.
Oh yeah.
But it's one of those. It'd be like going to Wrigley Field or a lot of Churchill Downs.
Yeah.
You know, venues. Sporting arenas that today still exist but have been around forever, and what makes them special is, and like if we tore this down and rebuild it, it wouldn't be the same. Right. It's like tear down Wrigley and put a new baseball stadium.
No, can't do it.
You lose the charm and the connection that makes it so special. So, and then when you walk around in the dark and you start thinking about the history and just everything that's happened here at this place, it's just really wild.
No, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, being just a place I've only ever seen on TV, it's fantastic to come here, and I think that's what we're trying to get at with this series. The places we go to are all, you know, so full of history. It's amazing.
No, and it really is what makes us special, is our history and tradition. You guys good? Good.
Fast.
Yeah, thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate y'all coming. So one of the fun things that we did, so in December of 1909, when they put the last brick in, Carl Fisher and the governor of the state of Indiana at the time actually put up what they called it a gold brick.
Okay.
But Carl Fisher was a promoter. It was a brick painted gold.
Sure.
Somewhere over time, that one's disappeared. Nobody knows where.
Okay.
It went. And in 1961, for the 50th anniversary, Tony Hallman planted a brick with Ray Haroon, who was our first Indy 500 winner, to celebrate the 50th anniversary. That one the museum has. And so on the 100th anniversary of the first Indy 500, we had Mary Hallman George and AJ Foyt, who was our first 4-time winner, put this brick in. And it's been there since 2011. And then one of the things I asked our team to do, we had our welder who does all our welding around here. He's a great bronze artist. And I said, I'd like to put bricks for the 4-time winners in the yard of bricks as something special. So what we did is we took, AJ was the first 4-time winner, so we went 4 bricks over and 4 bricks down to represent 4, and we put him in. Alan Senior was our second, same thing, 4 over, 4 down. Rick was our third, 4 over, 4 down. And then Elio Castroneves, obviously the most recent one. So a way to just really, there are 4 iconic drivers. Right? So to put them in there, and it's a little nod to the history of Carl Fisher and the governor putting a brick in to celebrate the bricks. AJ's brick's hollow, and we put something in it. We haven't told anybody what it is, but as we put it in, we shook it and did a little post on that. So someday down the road, whenever they excavate and they need it and they want to go through it, there's a cool little gift in there that AJ put in it.
That's fun.
To kind of make it special.
It's a really cool touch.
So this is if you're going to kiss the bricks.
Okay. Tell me how to do it. Give me the lowdown.
Right. I mean, people get down. Normally, we'll put pillows down for people's knees, but we don't have those. Get down and you kiss it however you want to kiss it. And
okay.
There you go. So we have a mini marathon. Our flag stand, when it was put in, it was designed to look like the mast of the USS Indianapolis, which was the ship that sank in World War II that delivered the bomb for World War II. And so and it's Memorial Day weekend when we have the Indy 500, so it's about men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. So that is one of the ways that we pay tribute to the fact that those men really sacrificed for our freedom.
It really comes through. It's one of those details you probably would have noticed it,
Right.
didn't point it out. But yeah,
Right.
it's very evident looking at it.
So one of my favorite things about race day is the flyover that happens. And when the flyover happens on the roof, you've got somebody that's talking to the airplanes, who's talking to the national anthem and knowing and the timing. And so each time whoever does their flyover, come in and they put their sticker on it.
Very cool. Very cool.
On the roof. So it
Yeah,
kind of
that's
makes
nice.
it does kind of make it kind of fun. There's not a better view in sports.
No.
So when they built the Speedway in 1909, it's basically 4.5 miles as the crow flies from downtown Indianapolis. This was all farmland. Where the racetrack sits was 4 80-acre parcels to come up with the 320 acres. And then we've since then expanded to about 1,000 acres on the whole campus. We've got 4 holes of golf in the infield there by the lake, 14 holes on the outside. And then that thing that looks like a lake way out there, it's about a 75-acre solar farm that we own. So
wow.
And it was in a space, there's an active railroad line that goes between the golf course and there.
Yeah.
Just really couldn't make it parking or anything.
Right.
It was a fan-facing thing, so we felt like, and it's in the middle of neighborhoods, and we just decided let's do something good with it, and we push all that energy back to the grid.
Wow.
So it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, that's great.
That we do there, and we've got some storage facility and some other things out in that space.
Yeah.
But this really, I mean, from this standpoint, I mean, you can see the whole facility, and you can just really see how big it is. So from the top of turn 3, which is the corner right over there above the dirt track, to the top of turn 1 right here is basically a mile.
Okay.
So that gives you a sense of how much scale
it's unbelievable. Having seen the whole track from up here, now I want to get on it.
So I'll show you another view before we go down. We'll go to the other side and just give you one more. So today, well, we'd be too early anyway, but Indiana's so flat.
Yeah.
Sunsets from up here are spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like watching over the ocean, right? You don't have anything in the way. And so from up here, you get a real, I mean, you get the sense of how flat Indiana is. But that tower way down there is the airport.
Okay.
So if you came in Indianapolis International, that's where the airport is.
Okay.
So you talked about what do you have to do to run the Indianapolis 500. A lot of it, this is sort of the heartbeat of everything that happens. So in this room, you got all these public safety folks. And so what we're trying to do is have one person from each of these so they're talking to each other. So if there's a traffic problem that's in the Speedway Police's district that everybody else knows, or the state police, which would be further out, we can all adjust and communicate if we're sending the ambulances. That all takes place in there. It's really a great way to keep everybody together. The best way we communicate to our fan and our customer is through all our video boards. So we've got 50 video boards on site. They're all different sizes, so you have to manage different sizes and how they look. So just like a normal production room.
Yep.
So on race day, you've got a director and a producer that's producing the show that goes on the big board. And some of that we take the TV feed, and some of that we're doing live with our own reporters, depending on what we've got. Or if we have weather, we're trying to inform fans. We're informing them all from inside here. Yeah. And they're close to safety, security if we need to get messaging.
Right.
And then on this side of the fence is basically the same thing. We got a lot of our federal folks in here, so we're a Tier 2 event. So you've got Secret Service, Department of Justice, FBI. I mean, all are here to help us execute the event. And so basically in this room, this is all law enforcement and federal officials over here. This is all our own team that's managing trams and gates and whatever. And then we're watching all our gates real time, so if things are backing up. So this is really the heartbeat of what allows 350,000 people to get in and get out and keep them safe.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a logistical problem you have to solve, and it shows the amount of work that has to go into it.
Well, and then we've been doing this so long, and we call it unified command, where it doesn't matter what color or uniform the person has. We've got a hierarchy in how we work, and everybody just sort of works together for the customer's benefit. Yeah. And it's really neat to see. And so we'll have people from all over the world come in to say, how do you execute this event? And it really starts with just collaboration from our own folks all the way up to the feds and all in between.
Yeah.
We make it
work. I tell you what, if you're working that day, it's not a bad view.
No, it is not a bad view for folks that, although when it's chaos of people, they're pretty focused.
It's a little bit different,
And we've often talked about, do we really need everybody on the ninth floor? But at some level, you want to be able to look out the window and say, there's the problem over there.
Exactly, it helps, for sure.
When they made me president, the president before me didn't like people. Probably, I mean, liked people, but he didn't interact with fans necessarily. So for me, it was like, we don't get to do this, but for the fans. So how do I really engage? And our admin office is behind turn 1. So I said, I need a place where I can put my computer, check on emails, and then connect to the fans. So we had a broom closet.
Okay.
that we basically, it was like a janitor's closet that we converted into my trackside office.
Okay.
And then over time, it's a mess right now because I got to get it set next week.
All right.
But it's gotten more functional over time in the sense that I actually have space to drink. So does anybody want anything?
A bottle of water, please.
Got it. Anybody?
Thank you.
I'm Boles. This is our war room.
Okay.
If there was ever a reason we all needed to meet for something like last year when we had weather, we all met in here to talk about how we're going to manage weather. So and it's right next to race control.
Okay.
So it's right now there's nothing happening here, but this entire screen has access to about 100 cameras, and this room is full of people who are managing the race itself. Wow. So if there's an incident on track, they're calling the yellow flag, sending out the ambulances, sending out whatever we need to take care of something that might happen on track. And it's close to, like if we had an incident on track that was a major incident, we'd probably all gather in here and say, okay, how do we handle it, or how do we manage it, how do we manage through it?
Wow.
When the Pagoda was built, this area was built to host Formula One back in the day. So
yes.
We had our first Formula One race here in 2000. And if you watch a Formula One race today, you still see Parc Fermé where they park the cars and then the drivers walk up the steps where they get weighed in and then they come back out on the podium. So this was all really designed for that post-race celebration. And now obviously, we use it for ours. So this would be our green room on race day where all the drivers gather before they're introduced to come out for the 500. All our other races, they gather up there and they're to introduce the 1,000 across the big podium.
Cool.
1,064 horsepower in that Corvette.
Yeah, I wish we'd be taking that on the track, but I think the pickup's gonna have to do.
Yep. Smartly locked it. One of my favorite things about the job is track laps.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah.
So it's crazy, like when you drive around here and it's banked.
Yes.
But not like a Daytona or somewhere else. So
yeah.
They
that's
consider
what I was
this
noticing.
relatively flat.
Yeah.
So we're 9 degrees and 12 or 13 minutes. And like I noted, this is exactly where the racetrack was when it was built in 1909.
Yeah.
So if you walk it, you clearly can see it, and you can visually see it, but it doesn't really do much in terms of the banking to allow your speeds to pick up a lot. So the cars really rely on their downforce or the wings that are on the cars to do that. And it's funny, you can feel small imperfections as we go across them. The faster you go, the less you feel them. Okay. Which is pretty crazy. The place where our bricks talk to us the most, right here as we got to turn T, you can see the discoloration. That's because we've done grinding there to really grind the racetrack down to a point that you don't feel those bumps. Okay. Now these lines right here, we'll go across one right there. Yep. There's another one right here. Yep. That's where we literally in the 1930s had to take a row of bricks out because they were buckling up, and then they filled it with asphalt. Okay. And the reason you feel the bump is we talked about earlier that asphalt and brick, they expand and contract at a different rate. Right. So it's a challenge. So we're going 70 miles an hour right here. We're going 30.
I know. It's amazing.
And it's just because the place is just so big.
Yeah.
But it's 235,000 permanent seats around us. Over time, we've taken some down. At one point, we were about 256,000. So this little gap you see there to the right, it's a place where the seats just didn't sell as well. And so 20 years ago, they took them down. We'll likely sell out the grandstands for this year's Indy 500. And so, we could use them this year, but not necessarily in every year. But then the iconic view is really this one, coming out of turn 4, coming down the home stretch, or to get the checker flag or the green to start things, and then pit entry right there. Yep. It's just really kind of where you sort of see. It's the image that people expect for the Speedway.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean we're zooming, but it doesn't feel like it. And
no, it's and the yard bricks, you just barely feel that. And the faster you go, the less really you feel it as you go across the bumps of the track. And then we're in a road car, so it's also you're gonna pick things up maybe a little bit more. Right. So the first Indy 500, they averaged 74 miles an hour, so we're currently going faster than they went to win the first Indy 500 in 1911. Right. But it was all brick back then. I can't imagine the surface like that.
Teeth chattering.
Yeah, and in a car back then with the technology back then. Yeah. So we'll see. Sometimes.
All right.
These are speed limited sometimes.
there's 100 miles an hour.
Okay.
And again, now, yeah, we're speed limited at 105. So that's all
Okay.
this truck is not. It's smart.
Okay.
It knows better than to let somebody go over 100 miles an hour down the highway. But the cool thing about this place, unlike other racetracks, so I think there's 8 times that we basically cross a bridge on the racetrack. So we've got tunnels
Right.
or the creek that actually runs through underneath the racetrack.
Right.
So like coming out, and in the winter, come out here in the winter, I said we let nature do its thing. So you'll know where all the tunnels are because the ice stays on them. So like this is all right here's tunnel 7.
I
so
see,
it's full.
yeah.
And then the pavement will be nice and dry and,
Right.
and nothing on it, but the ice and the snow stays there.
Yeah.
So we got two tunnels here on the front stretch. You got 2 tunnels on the south end. You've got a tunnel on the back stretch and a tunnel on the north end.
Right.
And then we'll cross 2 creeks. One of them that comes out right between our grandstands where they start to bend there. So you've got a creek literally right underneath us right now that runs underneath the racetrack and the grass. And in that gap in the grandstands over there, the creek comes back out, so you go over it again. So there's 8 points in time where the racetrack crosses over either a tunnel or a waterway.
Wow.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, which I think is probably not common among other racetracks. You want that more solid foundation.
It's not exactly what you would expect, but
right.
First suite ever built here was right here. The turn 2 suites were built in the middle 70s, and they pretty much are the same as they were back then. And the people that use them love them for the history and the tradition of the suites. And there's our golf course on the right. So 14 holes on the right, and then the 4 holes here on the infield on the left. Yeah. So the first golf course was here in 1929. Eddie Rickenbacker built it as a way to generate more revenue because all we were doing back then was racing one time a year for the Indy 500 and then was closed. So he built a golf course. Started out as an 18-hole course. It ended up being a 27-hole course, and then we've just gone back to an 18-hole course in the early 90s. We've hosted the LPGA, the Senior PGA, the PGA. The Beatles have played the golf course. I mean, just some really cool history even on the golf course. Yeah, you're right. The banking is not. It's barely noticeable. It's like a neighborhood road. So this is really it's considered a flat racetrack.
Yeah.
So it's versus banking. I told you about the mini marathon. If you run like that, it's really weird. You're just the way your gait works.
Yes.
One leg has to go down the other. So most people run down on the warm-up lane, which is flat.
Right.
What's crazy about race day? You come off this corner in an IndyCar at 230 miles an hour, and from this point to there, you got to get in pit lane and slow down to 60 miles an hour. And that's how quickly they have to do that. So they roll right down in pit lane and they get themselves slowed down to 60 miles an hour. Yeah, their days, like before I go home at work, I'll call my wife and say, hey, it's been a tough day, I'm gonna do some track lap. So you get out in the Corvette. It's a pretty nice way to.
That's a pretty good perk of the job.
Release some tension.
Yeah.
I think what makes the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, especially the Indy 500, so special is our history and tradition. The track being built in 1909 and the race being run every year on Memorial Day, Sunday weekend, really since 1911 or in that time frame. It's the history and the tradition. It's knowing that Ray Haroon won in 1911 and whoever wins the 109th running of the Indy 500 is doing it at the same racetrack, same place, same location as everybody that's come before that winner. And the families that come are generational, so they remember who introduced them and maybe not who introduced their family. There are people that'll come and tell me that we've had a family member that have been to every Indianapolis 500 since 1911. And so much of what makes it special is the fan experience and what the fans get out of it. It's a race, but it's all the other things that make it so special. And I think you can't replicate that really anywhere else.